Welcome to the CF Roundtable webcast series, the Janine Ritchie Memorial Webcast Series, which was funded by the Ritchie family, and we appreciate their support of the webcast series. This is our second webcast in the series, and for those of you who are new to CF Roundtable, I just wanted to let you know CF Roundtable is in its 32nd year of publication, and it is a publication that is put out by people with CF, for people with CF. It contains wonderful articles and columns about living with CF and has very wide distribution among the CF community. Tonight, we have our second webcast, Writing for Wellness, Tools for Building a Therapeutic Writing Practice, with the amazing Isabel Stenzel Byrnes. Isabel is a licensed social worker and has a M.P.H, a Master's of Public Health, and she is 50 years old and has cystic fibrosis. She is also 18 years post-lung transplant. Isabel is the co-author of my favorite book called The Power of Two, and stars in my favorite movie, The Power of Two, the movie. Both tell the story of her and her sister, Anna, and talk about their life with CF and their journey to lung transplant. CF Roundtable is thrilled to have Isabel tonight as our webcast presenter, and I turn it over to you now, Isabel.
Thank you so much, Beth Safian. I am forever grateful for our friendship and for your invitation for me to be a speaker. And also, I do personally want to thank the Janine Ritchie family for hosting this, for sponsoring this, and allowing this kind of webinar to be available for people with CF and our larger community on a permanent basis on the internet. So I'm hoping that some of you may be able to watch this in your own time. And I'm just so grateful to be the second speaker. So as Beth said, I am a social worker. I have specialized in writing groups for about 12 years now. And so it's something I'm very passionate about. And I do write for the CF Roundtable. I've written for them for, goodness, probably 20 years now. And it's just such a incredibly powerful opportunity to share stories with the larger CF community, people older and younger than I am. And I encourage you to consider writing an article to share your story. Hopefully after this webinar, you'll be equipped and have a little bit more ideas of how to get down and start writing for either for the roundtable or something else in your life. So I am here in California, and I want to just start. I just mentioned that because I have a sunny window next to me. It's not evening. And I just wanted to put a little bearing on my background here. And most of my writing groups have been occurring at Mission Hospice, which is where I work as a grief counselor. So I want to guide your attention to the quote on the top of the left screen, which is William Shakespeare's quote. And this was, 500 plus years ago. When he wrote, give sorrow words, give sorrow words. When life is hard, when things are difficult, when we're grieving, it can be so helpful to put that experience into words. He knew that. Give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak knits up the overwrought heart and bids it break. So that's going to be a theme of our exercise or our conversation today. So I want to invite you to be part of these four essential writing affirmations. I took one out because the fifth one is about teaching craft, and we're not teaching today. This is not an exercise in sort of helping you write better, because the most important thing of this webinar is to help you share your voice. And it really doesn't matter how you write, whether you use punctuation or grammar, that's not important here. What's important is writing from your heart. So these guidelines or affirmations were extrapolated from Amherst Writers and Artists and their wonderful program developed by Pat Snyder in Massachusetts. And they've been leading writing groups across the country and across the world for at least 3 decades. So the first affirmation is everyone has a strong, unique voice. Everyone. Number 2 is everyone is born with creative genius. We all have that blessing of creativity, of how to tell the story in your own way. Number 3 is writing is an art form that belongs to all people, regardless of economic class or education level. You did not need a college degree to write. Your voice, your dynamics, your lingo, the way you talk is all important. And that gives character to you and your story. Number 4 is a writer. A writer is someone who writes. Sometimes people say, oh, no, I'm not a writer. I haven't published a book. No, but actually you don't need to publish a book to be a writer. If you wrote an email today, or if you wrote a text today, you are a writer. We all write so much every day in this technical world. So for the workshop agenda, it'll be about 50 minutes or so. We're going to cover the basics around why writing is good for us. We'll do a short writing exercise together. I'm going to just see if that works based on our audience. We'll cover tools for building a writing practice. And I hope you'll be able to leave this webinar with more confidence that writing is something you can dive into and develop and cultivate as a routine hobby for yourself. So some guidelines when we do share, if we have time to do that, is to really share your truth. Please, in any kind of writing, I hope you know how important it is to share your honesty and truth of what's going on. You don't have to polish yourself. You don't have to present yourself as happy and fine and resilient and strong, because that's sometimes what we see in the CF community. But we all know that CF is really hard at times, hard on our physical bodies and hard on our mental health. So please be authentic and even be vulnerable in your writing about what it's like. Respect for different backgrounds and beliefs. We all cope with this illness in different ways and have grown up with different kinds of messages. All emotions are allowed and welcome. And then if we do share, I'm going to actually ask to pause the recording, so it's not going to be on the internet. But when we do share, what you say here, let it stay here. That's my motto. Please don't share it with the larger CF community or beyond. Refrain from giving advice and use I statements when sharing personal experience. And by the way, no one is required to share or read. Okay. So why should we write? Why should we write? Well, first of all, it's a deeply personal exercise that only you can do yourself. No one can help you. Your voice comes out on the page or on the document. It's cheap, let's face it. If you have either a computer or a notebook, kind of like this one, you can go at it. It does not take any money. It doesn't take much time. Some people think that writing is something you have to spend like 2 hours a day doing. That is not true. All of my exercises are 10 minutes. And that's what I'm going to encourage you to try, a 10-minute exercise where you set the timer on your phone and you go at it until it rings. Writing is portable. Now with our cell phones, we can write into a Google Drive document. We can write into our notes in the little note app. We can write an email to ourselves. And also, by the way, you can bring something like this in your purse and write anywhere you feel like it. It can stay private or shared. With a Google document, password protected, it can definitely stay private. There's all kinds of journals out there with keys. That's the old-fashioned way. You don't have to share it. And also, you can write whether you're sick or well. And that's, I think, really beautiful, is no matter what your stage of CF is, you have a story to share. And by the way, it takes no innate talent. You don't have to have a master's in fine arts to write. But more importantly, writing can foster self-awareness, insight into behavior, why you're doing the things you're doing, understanding of other people's struggles and your own, and a sense of your own growth. For example, if you're, let's say, 20 years old and you're writing about how hard it is to do your treatments, and then you put that journal aside, and when you're 40, you pick that journal up and you get to read what your life was like, your attitude towards treatments was way back then. It gives you some sort of insight of how far you've come, how you've changed, how you've grown, how your perspective has altered. And that can be really affirming in this long path of CF. So the power of story. I'm going to talk a little bit about why story is so important. All suffering is bearable if it is seen as a part of a story. All suffering is bearable if it is seen as part of a story. And when I had CF before my transplant, I never thought I was suffering. Suffering is a heavy word. I was just living life with CF. And maybe some of you feel that way too. So I don't want to imply that our lives are suffering. They certainly are not all the time. But there are times where things really do hurt. I'm wearing this eye patch because I'm recovering from eye cancer. Another bump in the very bumpy road of life with a transplant, and extension of life with CF. So there are definitely moments, some minor moments, some very major significant moments of suffering in this path. So why do stories matter? Stories make sense of life. When you get caught up in a podcast or a good book, it's because those stories just sort of make sense. They're fascinating in their own way. They draw us in. Stories help us regain control of our life, that we get to tell stories the way we want to. I often use the phrase, we had no control whether we had CF, but we certainly have all the control in the world around how we want to tell our story with CF. And stories help shape our lives. We are influenced, we learn from our stories. We are encouraged to change from stories. Sharing stories gives us back our voice. There's sort of a dominant narrative in the media, as you can probably tell, like the strongest and the most violent get the most media attention. Whereas us, the little people in the world that are trying to fight to survive, sometimes our story's kind of hidden. Or maybe if we're grieving the death of our loved one, our stories are not always seen or heard. And when we write a story, it can become something more powerful than a private life, a private experience. And then sharing stories builds community. We all know, even in the last year or two, we've seen a number of books about the CF community. Little Matches is one of them, Marian O'Hare, and Mallory's book, Breath from Salt, is another one that was very significant. And it feels good, right? Even the story of 5 Feet Apart on the screen feels good to see our CF expressed out there by other voices in the community. It builds solidarity. This is our narrative nature. This is where we came from, this ancestral evolutionary time of gathering as community and listening to each other's stories. So I feel like when I do this, sit down with people and talk and hear stories and tell stories, there's something deeply primitive that's satisfying about this experience. And sometimes we lose it in our crazy modern world. Our stories are more, technical, but there's a personalized feeling when we can get to know each other, even face to face and on Zoom, to hear our stories. So how did I get here? A little background I wanted to share about my experience. I was born in 1972, 50 years ago. I'm grateful to be here. And I spent quite a bit of time in the hospital. And this is my twin sister, Anna. We both were hospitalized together frequently for CF. And probably around, starting at age 10, 11, and then every other month from 13 to 15, we were in the hospital. And it really started because my mother would come with journals and she would say, here, write about your experience, write about what you're feeling. And we'd start writing maybe 2 or 3 pages, and then we'd stop. And then a couple of hospital stays later, she would give us a new journal and the same thing would happen. So we have a bunch of short entries from our childhood. And it wasn't until age 14 that we got more passionate about writing a journal, a colorful journal called Life at Kaiser. Anna and I took turns to express what we were going through with our illness, to write about IVs and how to get an X-ray and how to take enzymes, or what TPN was, total parental nutrition. So what we were really doing in hindsight was we were gaining mastery. We were gaining strength and knowledge and competency in our illness experience, and we were putting it on paper. And then after we finished the booklet, we had the clerk in front of the receptionist basically make like 100 copies of this book, and we sold them for $1. So that was a great experience to see that other people were interested in our stories. And it eventually got us a couple, spots on TV, just because I guess people think this was intriguing for kids to do this. But it was really all about writing and telling our stories. And then writing documents community. And with permission, I share this share this photo. And you can see Beth Suffian in here and a number of other superstars from our CF community. A photo like this can be a prompt to write stories about what it's like when we were able to gather together without masks, when we were able to have community. This picture was taken, I think, in 96 or 97. And unfortunately, many people are no longer here. I actually counted, there's about 4 or 5 of us that are still here. And so when we write about people who have died, we actually take on their voice. We can tell their stories on their behalf. I remember something about everyone here in this photo, and so I can share that with others. And sometimes I do in my roundtable articles. So of course, writing comes in many versions. I mentioned emails and texts, but we can write in many ways that kind of appeal to us. For some, poetry is the way that feels right. Poetry does not mean it has to rhyme. It just means the writing does not have to reach the end of the page. So literally, that's the only thing that separates poetry from prose to me, is that the words don't go all the way to the right side of the page. They just shorten. Otherwise, you add anything you want to that poem. There's journal writing, and I'll talk more about that later. There's poetry. Lyrics, songwriting is a really powerful way to express oneself and to put words to an experience. Prose, of course, essay writing, short stories, etc. Sometimes that reminds people of a school assignment, but essays don't always need to be so, academic. They can be a very short commentary on your experience as well. There's memoir, there's nonfiction, There are blogs, of course, lots of websites you can write for, Facebook and social media, even those 140 characters on Twitter is a form of writing. And then, of course, there's fiction. You can write about your experience without people knowing whether it's your experience. You can incorporate new characters and different plots and so on, but it's still informed by your experience. And that's a very exciting way to write if you want to keep some of your privacy. And another example, some of you may be familiar with the way we had opportunities and have opportunities in the CF community to write. So this was created by Michelle Compton, the late Michelle Compton, who established the Breathing Room. And that was a gallery of photography made by people with CF. And she invited us to take a photo that represented how our CF experience was, and then write a poem about it. And I know some people in our community who have done that. It was really powerful for me when I was 25 years old and feeling like I was drowning, soaking in all the CF medical stuff that was happening at that time, and kind of still is happening. But as a way to express the experience, it felt really good. And nowadays I see people posting videos that they're making about themselves. That's not quite writing, but it's still storytelling, very powerful storytelling. So there's so many creative ways to tell our stories. And I mentioned this before, we can write whether we're healthy or sick, weak or strong. And so this is when I started writing. I had that old clunky laptop that you see on the table. And during my treatments, when I was doing IVs, all of the times where I was buckled down on the chair, I could still write. And it was wonderful because, as you know, it was about 3 hours a day of being stuck like that at least. And so I got a lot of writing done. And it was really a time in my life where I was either facing the end of my life or the end of the CF as I knew it, being listed for transplant. And I wanted to document that story. And I also selfishly wanted to document my life with my sister, my twin, because it was so unique how we kept each other alive. And I knew that my writing would outlive me. Regardless of what happened, it would be here for others to read if we were to publish. So we did publish, and publishing is a personal choice. We wrote for ourselves, and it wasn't until the book arrived in our hands that we really were like, uh-oh, everyone's going to read this. And it was a pretty powerful kind of reality check that we didn't really, deeply absorb until it happened. So we published this book way back in 2007, and it was translated to Japanese by Mother's Country. And it was very powerful and affirming that someone was interested in the story of illness, which, maybe my own cultural experience and humility, I felt like, why would someone be interested in illness? Because it's so universal. But again, as I mentioned, it was how we told the story of illness that captured people. And also, I just want to say that this is a writing workshop, and I could do a whole other workshop on publishing, because publishing is a sort of sidetrack of writing that can take you away from the heart of what you want to do. It can be demoralizing because our book publisher market is very selective, and we have to believe in our story more than we believe in making money from a book. And if that may be the focus of the publishers, but it takes persistence to find the right publisher that will believe in you and your story. So as I mentioned, Anna and I wrote this book together. We published it. We went on book tours together. I love this quote by Jean Sinead Bolin. It is not just what happens to us that shapes who we are, but what happens in us that makes the difference. And so I emphasize here that writing our book transformed me. Our first draft was 450 pages, full of anger, full of grief, a bit chaotic because there was so much we wanted to say and had to organize it. And then getting all of it out and rereading it over and over and being able to see the heaviness and the negative, I don't want to say negative, but the difficult stuff in our life was curative. It truly was like it sanitized my mental health. It really relieved me of so much heaviness. And that's why I started to do writing groups. So my sources of inspiration, I just wanted to share this list for you to maybe screenshot, or you'll have this webinar available and you can pause it. There's so many great resources on how to write and writing a book together and writing down your soul. The best ones to me were L.C.S.W, Writing as a Way of Healing, exceptional book. And Tristine Rayner, that was another really good book that helped me write my memoir, Your Life as Story. She sees our stories as like a pearl necklace. It's a great metaphor. Our life is a pearl necklace, and every pearl is an event or an experience that rocked our world, or rocked us, or changed us, or was hard, or transformative, or celebratory. So the goal of writing a memoir is to literally put those pearls together in the right order into a memoir, into a book, into a necklace, if you will. So I started these writing through loss groups in 2010, so 12 years. And so I've offered writing through loss workshops for a large number of audiences, including mothers with CF at various mothers retreats, our CF community in the form of CFRI retreats, medical staff, donor families through transplant networks, and even for bereaved children and bereaved parents as well. At Mission Hospice, where I work, probably 3 times a year, I offer these 8-week, 1.5-hour groups for bereaved adults. And we kind of limit the time to 90 minutes because it can be very heavy and intense. But the bonding that happens almost immediately is quite profound. I have 12 different curricula for the grief groups. And to me, it's a very exciting and productive time of brainstorming when I create these curricula. I love doing that. It's my form of creative writing to do this. And that all of these groups are open to the public as well as to hospice family members. So I'm switching now gears to give you a little background on narrative writing and why we write about our lives and what the history is. And I'm just going to briefly go over this. Some of you may be familiar with Viktor Frankl. He's an incredible human being who's really changed psychiatry. He also survived the concentration camps, the Holocaust. I think he was in Auschwitz, but just a survivor to endure what he did as a psychiatrist. And he wrote 10 years after the Holocaust, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, a short book that really talks about the suffering that he went through and his belief that all stories matter if there's some meaning, that if, even in the most intense suffering, like living through the Holocaust, there was meaning. For him, his meaning was found in work and love. And that, with meaning, there are no ends to stories. I love how he puts that. If there's meaning, the story becomes eternal. And that just the essence of meaning gives us hope for the future. And I love this quote from Dorothy Allison: "I am the only one who can tell the story of my life and say what it means." So you are the only one who can tell the story of your life and say what it means. And it might take time to figure out what it means. When something really difficult happens to us, we can't tell the story of the meaning right away. It needs to evolve. Like Viktor Frankl took 10 years to write his book about meaning. And then as a counselor, I often employ narrative therapy. And I only share this, you don't have to be a counselor for this to matter. But some of the key concepts of narrative therapy is that stories are key to facilitate healing. We need to tell them, and sometimes tell them over and over. We need to externalize, almost like imagine the story that's bothering us so much and take it outside of us and put it over here. And see it from a little bit of a distance, or then have the therapist or have a friend or group of friends see that story outside of you. And I think this is one of their most significant aspects of narrative therapy, and Michael White and David Epstein, who kind of developed this, was that sometimes we make up stories in our mind. I mean, actually, we do that a lot. We make up stories and that things are the way they are, or I am the way I am, based on, something that happened to us, something other people told us or did to us. But sometimes we really need to re-examine those stories, writing them down, repeating the story over and over, and externalizing that story will help us see if that story is true. So again, identifying events in a client's life that run counter to the story, and then explore alternative narratives. So what is another story that happened besides the one that you're stuck on? Now that can be as simple as something like, I'm just thinking here out loud. I'm not good at writing is a story we tell ourselves. I got a B- in college. That's true in freshman writing. So I could never write a book. I'm not good at writing. And so that's a story I tell myself, but I wrote anyway. And I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And some of the stuff I wrote, I thought was really good, or I liked. I should just say I liked. And I got affirmation when I shared it with others. So now that narrative has changed. I think I'm a pretty good writer. So I hope you can think about stories you tell yourself and question them, and maybe even, write them down and read what you wrote and say, wait a minute, is that really true? Is there something else I could say? So Alette Willis calls this restoring oneself. We all need to restory ourselves and our narrative, even the CF narrative, right? I thought I was going to die young, and now I'm on a Vertex drug. Now I have my whole future ahead of me. Now what? We have to restory ourselves. Maybe you'll go back to school. Maybe you'll pursue a different career or family. And James Pennebaker is really important to bring up here. He has revolutionized both psychology as well as writing. And so his early book was called Opening Up: The Healing Power of Expressing Emotion. I think he has like 30 plus books published at this point. But his early book described studies he did on students. He was a college professor, I believe at SMU, and he found that students who wrote, and he gave everybody assignments, write 20 minutes a day for 4 days. That was the only assignment, about the most challenging experience in your life. So write 20 minutes a day for 4 days in a row about the most challenging experience in your life. And he found that he then studied these people's health over time, blood draws, visits to the doctor, cortisol levels, heart, cardiovascular fitness. And he found that people who inhibit or suppress their thoughts and feelings have generally poor health outcomes. So holding things in, holding in the hardships, the struggles, the difficulty is not good for our health. And I'm going to extrapolate and say it's not good for our CF health. So Maya Angelou, who was just brilliant, said, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you, holding it in, hiding CF, making it a secret, being too embarrassed to share it with others. Over time, that may not be good for your health, for example. And that can even extend to even greater struggles, molestation as a child. The things that we hide take energy. They take energy away from what we want to pursue. My friend called it putting wrinkles in the fabric of your life, which I think is a beautiful way to put it, that sometimes sharing those hardships is like ironing out those fabrics in your life and making them smoother for your future. So James Pennebaker said that, writing about your difficulties can reduce physician visits, improve immune function, lower depression. Pretty amazing stuff. And the more days that people wrote, the greater the benefit to their health. So our minds and bodies are so connected. This was proven in multiple different populations that I'm listing here, across multiple cultures and countries. These kinds of experiments were offered, and it still applies that reducing physician visits and health improvements were seen. And so it kind of makes sense, right? In the Catholic Church for 1,000 years, 2,000 years, there has been the confession. In Japanese culture, there's other ways that we express ourselves privately and in safe settings, in spiritual settings, and so on. That's good for us. We need it. So what kind of writing is healing? And this is Dr. Pennebaker. He used some computer technical program to assess the kind of writing of people who are generally healthier over time. And he looked at positive words, negative words, death-related words, use of past tense, and use of pronouns. He has a whole book about pronouns, The Secret Life of Pronouns. And he found that more insight words, like using the word understand, realize, know, meaning, means, and causal words like because, reason, effect, cause, were used, the greater the physical benefit and the less rumination 1 year later. So we can talk about a very difficult experience in our life, but because of that, we've grown as a person. We could talk about, a very stressful breakup within a relationship, but because of that, we met someone and it helped us understand that we have habits that can impair a healthy relationship. So that sort of connection to growth essentially is what, helps make the writing more beneficial for us. And then finally, writers who use different pronouns, he, she, they, I, in addition to I, showed better health improvements because they're able to, I believe it's because they are able to kind of take the perspective of other people and gets outside of one's own head and see the impact of these stressors on others. Okay, and then finally, I just wanted to say what's so obvious about writing, why it's so amazing, is that it links our left brain, which is all about what words should I use, how should I form this sentence, should I punctuate here or not, that logical cognitive processing brain, to the creative and emotional brain. So there's something about being able to connect the two, right and left brain, that is the hallmark of writing itself, but also to me, one of the therapeutic aspects of writing. So let's talk about your writing in the chat. Let's see, we've got 14 people. That's small enough. Yeah, you can write in the chat here. Small enough for you to write in your, if you feel comfortable to write in the chat. What's your relationship with writing? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you love it? Why? Feel free to write. And also, you can add, what are some hesitations in your experience with writing? What holds you back? I'm going to guess some of you are going to say time. I don't have time to do this. What are some other barriers to writing? Before I started writing in 2003, I believe I had an invisible little bird sitting on my shoulder that would tell me and remind me that I got a B-. And that was a bad grade for me. And that I wasn't good. And the teacher said my writing was not strong and didn't make sense. So I just felt like that bird was constantly telling me, don't even bother, don't even try. And when I was younger, my mother would say, Anna is the writer and Isa is the artist. And so that bird was reminding me that just do art, don't write. But then eventually, I learned to flick that bird off of my shoulder. So let's see.
Isabel,
Oh, the
we
chat
don't
box.
have the
Oh,
we
okay.
don't have the chat enabled.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. So
Yeah.
what we'll do is when you get ready to have people write, and then we're going to pause.
Yes. Okay.
People can raise their hand when we come back, and we can unmute anyone who wants to talk.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that, guys. So let's see. Now I have the Q&A box open, and I want to take it off so I can read the screen. Okay, so let's do a short exercise together. I think we're okay on time. So I'm going to invite you to go grab a pen and pencil, or if you're on your laptop, to open up a Word document. Move your screen if you have a Mac, or open up a Word document in some other way on your screen. And I'm gonna invite you to write. And again, even though this is a group exercise, please write for yourself. There will be an opportunity to share if you're comfortable doing so, but you don't have to. And sometimes what happens is we start thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to write and I'm going to read, so I got to make this writing a certain way, and it's got to be good. We start to censor ourselves in some way, but I'm going to encourage you to just let go, just blow out, exhale all of those anxieties, and just put the pen to paper, put the fingers on the laptop, and just let whatever comes out come out. So these are prompts. These are called writing prompts, little ways for you to energize, little ways for you to get your juices flowing. So what I'd like to do is invite you to choose one. Choose one of these 5 prompts, whatever speaks to you and jumps out. What does strong mean to you? We hear that a lot in the CF community. You're so strong. What does that mean to you? I used to be ... but now I'm ... And so those are opportunities to fill in the sentence and tell a story about your past and where you are now. Number 3, write about what makes your heart heavy. That can be anything. A wide open prompt, inviting you to go to the place of emotion. Number 4, I never thought I could ... Again, finishing a sentence. I never thought I could. And then here's number 5, is an opportunity to practice a contrast writing, where we're going to write for about 8 minutes. So for 4 minutes, I invite you to write a list. I remember. What do you remember from your past? It can be anything. It can be anything that comes up. I'm going to encourage you not to overthink and sort of quiet that frontal cortex, if you will. Just quiet the noise that our minds create for ourselves, and just let your writing come out as is. And after about 4 minutes, I'm going to ask you, I'll let you know the time, to write another list. I don't remember. Okay, so that's a contrast, a prompt. So does that work for people? I'm going to, let's see, it's 5:50, good timing for me in Pacific time, 7:50 for Central. I'm going to invite you to start writing now, and we can, if you, Jordan, can pause the recording, you're welcome to do that. Okay, so thank you for everyone who did partake in the writing exercise. For those of you listening to the webinar, we did have some writing prompts. I think you saw it on the last slide here, and invited people to write and then to read and share out loud. So if you're working on this on your own, I encourage you to take 10 minutes out, write, but maybe even share that writing with a friend or a family member and see what their response is with a trusted person so you feel supported. We talked about listening and the sacredness of listening. But now I'm going to talk about tools for building a writing practice. Number one is get out of your own way. Get out of your way, meaning, excuses. And then most importantly, letting go of judgment, letting go of comparison. He writes better, she writes better. All of that is so unnecessary. None of us are like Isabel Allende. That's because she's herself and we are ourselves. Let go of productivity, achievement, and accomplishment. And what I mean by that, and I might just be talking about the Bay Area, is that, we don't have time for writing. It's we gotta work. We gotta do something else that is productive. Writing is a hobby, an internal kind of personal development hobby. And sometimes we just say we don't have time for that. And then also to believe in the power of your story. I'm curious if anyone has ever thought, well, I don't have anything to say. I mean, there's nothing interesting about my life, but there is. It's how you tell it that's interesting. Make space to write, meaning if you are like me, I confess, and spend 30 minutes of scrolling on my Facebook, 30 minutes in the morning and sometimes at night. Maybe I can cut that down to 20 minutes and have 10 minutes to write. Really make my space available. Maybe I can do Instacart so I have a little more time to write, do other things that are important for my self-care. Keep it handy, make it accessible. Your cell phone, again, notes can be used for your writing. A small notebook you keep in your purse, which is what I did when I wrote my book. I would have an idea and pull out that notebook and write a little note about the idea, the story, the plot I wanted to share. Keep your journal at your bedside so you make a routine at nighttime to write for 10 minutes before you sleep. It's hard to do that with technology always in our face. So also to establish a routine without interruptions. Maybe it can be during your morning coffee. Maybe it can be, after dinner, just gently sort of walking away from the noise and hustle bustle of family life and just sitting quietly in the house and having your space for 10 minutes. Questions to consider while journaling, what are you feeling? It's important to write down the feeling words. I was scared, I was angry, it pissed me off. My heart broke when my sister died. To write those feelings down, and that's where the crack of the voice happens when you read out loud. That's when we express that emotion is so important. What are you experiencing? Do you notice your hand clutching the pen? Do you notice your body tightening when we're telling the story? What is your true voice? I keep talking about that authentic honesty. How are you the heroine or the hero in your story? That's really important, to be the hero and heroine of your story so that you're the protagonist. You're the one that is making this story unfold. And I guess what helps to be the hero or heroine is to answer this question: what are you trying to learn, or how are you trying to grow from this? And whatever this is, a grandchild born, trikafta, a blockage, losing a part of your body to cancer. What are we trying to learn from this? Because that's really all we can do from tough experiences, to learn and grow. So goals and the purpose of writing are important too, to really establish clearly for yourself. What do you need to write for? What is it going to do for you? Only you have that answer. I can't say it in this kind of webinar for you, but you know what your goals are. Getting things off your chest, wanting to publish, wanting to organize thoughts to help you with decisions. I think, Jeannie, there was part of your writing was whether to go to work or not go to work. That decision-making writing is really, really powerful. or just to establish some inner calm. Maybe you had a difficult conflict with a coworker and you just need to write it all out and just let it go, or other reasons. So a common situation is I don't know what to write about. And that's where prompts come in handy. So you can look at poetry, quotes, metaphors, songs. Everything is a prompt. That's how I see it because I teach these classes. You know, walking on the sidewalk, a crack in the sidewalk is a prompt. Write about a crack in the sidewalk, metaphorically speaking, in your life. Prompts that I invite self-reflection. How has your identity changed? How have you been self-efficient? What's your support system like? What are your goals? What's your growth like after difficulty? Prompts that promote storytelling, you know, the diagnosis. Most of us may not remember, but some of you do remember. Interpersonal challenges, sharing memories. A good story has plot and it also has crises and climaxes. And those are important to get out. And those are the very things that help us heal from writing, is to get those climaxes and crises out. And then photos are incredible prompts. Just looking at the old photo album can promote stories. Having dreams, waking up first thing in the morning with your journal and starting to write about your dreams. Dream journaling is pretty big, and I can't say more about it because of time, but it's an interesting way to capture your unconscious psyche at night. Soul collage, other art can be a prompt for writing as well. And then you can have this list if you'd like, but there's so many ways. Write a haiku, write a repetition. There's some great poems out there, the name of whom I forget, but it's really a list of things this person is afraid of. I fear this, I fear that, I fear this. It's such a powerful poem. I wish I could remember the writer, but we can do that too. You know, even a repetition like, I hate blank, I hate therapy, I hate nebulizers, I hate washing nebulizers. Those can be poems in themselves. Wishes, dreams, responding to quotes I mentioned. Contrast, just like I remember, I don't remember. You can write what you love and what you hate, what you want or what you don't want, what's good in your life, what's bad in your life. Those contrasts can be very therapeutic. And then stream of consciousness. And then I talked about finishing a sentence. Stream of consciousness is just writing whatever comes. So these are some suggestions for journaling by Joan Monheit, who's a East Bay writing group facilitator. To start with an entrance meditation is a good idea. I usually read a poem to get people into the space of writing. Date every entry, that's important, so you know where you were at that certain place in your life. Read and reread your writing. That can just offer the insight of repetition. Write quickly, she says. Once you start writing, keep writing. Don't just end, but keep that story going until it ends. And then write naturally and tell the truth. So these are some journaling resources. If you're interested, Ira Prograph has an intensive journaling program. And then Kathleen Adams has a Center for Journal Therapy, journaltherapy.com, if you're interested in these resources. So I think that is it. Thank you so much for participating. I know it's a little bit long. I wish you well in your writing adventure. If you have any additional questions, this is my contact information. I'd be happy to support them. And my aspiration is to lead a writing group for the CF community. Through CFRI at some point. So I look out for those emails about that. So thank you so much for sharing and for being here and listening. And I wish you well. Take good care. Thank you, everyone.